I want to take a quick moment and thank my patrons for all the support. You guys rock, and I really appreciate everything that you do. If you happen to like this video, please click the like button or subscribe, or do both. It really helps the channel out, and it helps more people see the channel, which helps me get motivated to do more videos like it. I think the Wizard is the most powerful and versatile class in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. But it doesn't mean that they're easy to optimize. In fact, their large spell selection and versatility adds a bunch of complexity and sometimes can be overwhelming for players to make the right choices and decisions in order to maximize the optimization of their character build. Welcome to the Twisted Tentacle Inn. I'm your Innkeeper, and today we'll be doing part 2 of my Wizard Spell Optimization series, and we will be discussing different damage types and area of effects. The purpose of this video series is for you to get a glimpse into my thought process in spell selection. It's not a written in stone type of thing. So if I happen to say that a certain damage type, for example, force damage, is better than another, for example, poison damage, it doesn't mean that that's always going to be the case, and that one spell that deals poison damage, or that all spells that deal poison damage, are bad spells. That's not what I'm trying to say here. This is just basically what I use in order to remind myself which spell I should choose if everything is pretty much equal, or if I'm stuck in deciding between one spell or another. Then I'll say, okay, what type of damage does it do, and what type of saving throw does it give, and what area of effect does it have? So these are different things, a checklist of things that I look for if I'm trying to decide between two particular spells. I hope that clarifies things, but let's not waste any more time. Let me just go ahead and go into each damage type and why I think one is better than another. The best damage type in the game, in my opinion, and this is going to surprise a lot of people, it's not force damage, it's radiant damage. And there are a lot of reasons for that. So I'm going to put a list here on the side, and you guys can see all the different damage types, how many creatures are immune, how many creatures are resistant to each one, and that'll kind of give you a glimpse as to most of them why one tends to be better than another. It doesn't give the entire picture though. For example, force, 0 creatures resist it, and there's only 1 creature that's immune to it in the monster manual, and you're probably never going to face that creature. So yeah, it's a great damage type. But the reason I say radiant is better, even though 4 creatures resist it, is because radiant damage tends to have secondary effects that are generally not immediately noticed when you select that damage type. When you face certain creatures, a lot of them that regenerate or heal do not regenerate or heal if they're hit with radiant damage, especially at the higher levels. So if you're hitting a creature with radiant damage and you prevent them from healing 25 hit points that round, then you've effectively done an extra 25 points of damage to that creature, which is nothing to sneeze at. Not just that, but even at the low levels, a very common creature type, the zombie, tends to be very hard to kill because when you hit it, it gets to make a saving throw, and if it succeeds, it comes back to life and keeps coming at you. Unless you hit it with radiant damage. If you deal radiant damage to a zombie, it doesn't get to make that saving throw. It just dies. So radiant damage tends to have this secondary effect that affects a lot of creatures and tends to impact combats far more than force damage. There are no creatures that I can think of where force damage has that kind of effect against them. Not just that, but especially demons, outsiders, and undead. There's a lot of them that are actually vulnerable to radiant damage. So not only are you doing a great damage type, but you also may be doing double damage to them because they're vulnerable to it. Now that said, force damage is a great damage type. You can't go wrong. There's very few things that are immune to it, and there's nothing that's resistant to it. So generally, if you deal force damage, you roll your damage and you tell your dungeon master, and they're going to write down that same damage amount off of the creature that you just attacked. So something that is a very efficient damage type and still very good. And then you go down the list, Psychic, Thunder, Necrotic, Acid. Those are all pretty good damage types. And then you get to some of the more elemental damage types like Lightning, Cold, and Fire. Fire's, a lot of creatures are just outright immune to it. Piercing, Bludgeoning, and Slashing. There's a lot of creatures that are resistant to it. Poison, that's the kind of special animal 95 creatures are immune to it. And this is the thing with poison. It's not just the damage that they're immune to. Most of those creatures that are immune to poison damage are also immune to the secondary effect of poison effects, which is the poison condition. So not only are you not dealing the poison damage, you're not able to benefit from that poison condition if you happen to hit a creature with it. So that's why poison is a lot of times not a damage type that you may want to choose. Now, one other thing to keep in mind, other than poison, fire, necrotic, I wouldn't weigh immunity too heavily. For example, the monster manual, the enemies in there, most of the creatures that are immune to lightning are like blue dragons or some kind of elemental. In fact, there are 4 different types of blue dragons, so that's 4 out of the 10 creatures that are immune to lightning. So really only 6 are immune to lightning, or 7, right? So these are things that you need to kind of consider. The numbers don't paint the entire picture. But overall, I think the ones that you want to look for specifically are going to be Radiant, Force, and Psychic. Those are the 3 damage types that generally you're going to be okay with. Psychic, the creatures that are immune, I think there's 10 creatures that are immune to psychic damage. They tend to be inanimate objects or some kind of construct because they don't have a mind, so they can't take psychic damage. So if your campaign doesn't happen to be combating a lot of constructs, or you anticipate very few construct battles, then psychic damage is going to be fantastic, just like Force and Radiant. Now, in addition to the different damage types, something that you also want to keep in mind when making your spell selection is the different area of effects. So if you look in the player's handbook, it kind of explains each area effect and how they work. So the area effect that I tend to choose, I like a cylinder because not only does it get creatures on the ground, at higher levels especially, there's going to be a lot of flying creatures. Cylinder is one of the few that'll hit a very nice area of effect, top to bottom, so that's really nice to have. And then a cube and a sphere, these 2 are equally good in different circumstances, but they tend to have very similar area of effects. Then a line is going to be one of the least desirable area of effects. It's very specific. Creatures have to be in a line for you to get the most out of it. It's very hard to pull that off. And then finally, cone. I think other than single target, which, they tend to have the reasons why they have single target, so I don't include that in this list. But of the area of effects, I think the cone is the least efficient because they tend to have much lower range. So let's say you have a cone of 20 foot. You got to be able to have creatures within 20 feet of you, which is not ideal for a wizard. And it goes outwardly like that. So they have to be in a very special formation in order for you to maximize the cone effect. Cones are only great if your team forms a line, so everyone is flanking you, and then the cone shoots out forward, then you can get a good amount of creatures as they're running towards you. But that's such a specific use case that cone spells are something that even if it's a great damage and a great damage type, I will think twice about selecting a spell because it has a cone effect. Not that I won't ever pick one, but I will definitely think twice. The other thing to keep in mind when choosing area of effect is a spell that affects a larger area is generally a better option than one with a smaller area. So that helps you get the most and maximize the most, even though a lot of large area of effect spells might injure your own allies. There are definitely tactical ways for you to avoid that. And that does it for part 2 in my Wizard Spell Optimization series. I hope that this video was helpful, and if it was, please consider clicking like on there. If you have any questions, leave them down there in the comments down below. And as always, I am your Innkeeper from the Twisted Tentacle Inn. Check in anytime. I'll talk with you then. And as always, I am your Innkeeper from...